Good morning, everybody.
Morning.
Welcome to the Big Book Stays Alive. And before we start, let's go and start this with the serenity prayer, if we could, to let God come into this and take over. So, God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference.
Amen.
Welcome, everybody. My name is Jim Barnes. I'm an alcoholic. I bring you greetings from the original West Side group in Tulsa, Oklahoma. We meet on Tuesday and Thursday nights at 68th and Sheridan in the Fellowship Lutheran Church. If you're in the Tulsa area, we'd love to see you there sometime. Tuesday nights, Big Book. Thursday nights, 12 and 12. The first Thursday of the month, we study the corresponding tradition of the month. The last Thursday of the month, we celebrate AA birthdays. And so if you're ever in the area, come and see us. My date of sobriety is May 9th, 1985. Last time I was here, Joe just told me it was in 2014, doing the same thing. So it's been a long time. It's been a long pause, and I'm just glad to be here. And I want to emphasize this before we start, that we're not here to sign big books. We're not here to be the gurus of AA. We're here to share with you what we have experienced through this book called Alcoholics Anonymous. Okay, so this weekend, let's go ahead and have fun. We'll be taking breaks because I've learned that my butt can only handle so much, and so at the same time, the butt and brain really kind of, they don't work together. So we'll be taking breaks and be having fun and some fellowship here. So again, just enjoy it, and we'll share with you what we've learned through this book, okay?
My name is Daniel Hacker. I'm a recovered alcoholic. My sobriety date is 12/6 of 03. And, I've had a blessed life since the day I decided to turn my will and my life over to that care of God. And I'm really excited that Jim and I are able to do this. This is my actual first time in, public, in the presence of y'all. We've done it on Zoom before, so the great thing about it is I came to a place where there won't be any judgment. So that's perfect for me. You know what I mean? And so as we go through this thing, we're gonna, like Jim said, we're just gonna kind of try to share everything that we've learned from this book and some experiences, and we hope that by the end of this thing, somebody has maybe had a light switch click on, or maybe had a thought that, oh yeah, I'm one of them, and this will do for me, this will work for me, and maybe attached to that power that this book so well brings us to. So as that, Jim, you want to start us off?
Thank you. Let's go start this morning on Roman numeral 17, XVII. In the forward of the second edition, the third paragraph near the bottom, and this is why we're here today. It was now time the struggling groups thought that they placed their message and unique experience before the world. This determination bore fruit in the spring of 1939 by the publication of this volume. The membership had been reached by 100 men and women. Now please hear this next sentence. The fledgling society, which had been nameless, now began to be called Alcoholics Anonymous from the title of its own book. The fledgling blind period ended and AA entered a new phase of the pioneering time. Now, why is this important? Because the Fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous was named after a book called Alcoholics Anonymous, not vice versa. The first woman to get sober in Alcoholics Anonymous was given a manuscript of the book. That's all. No fellowship, a manuscript of the book. Her psychiatrist said, if you follow these directions, you're going to get sober. And she did. So this is why this is so important. This is why we're here today. To remember that people can get sober through a book called Alcoholics Anonymous. The fellowship is vital. We have to have each other. But the book comes first. The program of AA comes first, then the fellowship. Okay? But unfortunately, we've watched it, the movement trend here the past few years especially, it's more about fellowship. More about fellowship. I've had the opportunity to do a lot of meetings on Zoom, and people from all over the world who know nothing about this book with long-term sobriety. It hurts my heart to think that they go to meetings, open discussion, how's my day, I'm pissed off, I'm more pissed off than you are, and they think that's AA. But it's not. It comes from a book, okay? So with that in mind,
Jim, let me talk about this
Sure.
real quick. If we go to Roman numeral 9, a couple pages back, there's a paragraph there. It says, "We shall be interested to hear from those who are getting results from this book, particularly from those who have commenced work with other alcoholics. We should like to be helpful to such cases." So once again, the book, the work is in the book, and that's where we want to stay at.
okay, so now let's go to Roman numeral 25. We're going to skip around a little bit for time's sake. I encourage you to read the second edition. It talks about our history of AA, and I would encourage you to read that. But we're going to start this morning with the doctor's opinion. And so we of Alcoholics Anonymous believe that the reader will be interested in the medical estimate and the plan of recovery described in this book. Convincing testimony must surely come from medical men who have experienced with the suffering of our members who have witnessed our return to health. A well-known doctor, chief physician at a nationally known prominent hospital specializing in alcohol and drug addiction, gave Alcoholics Anonymous this letter. To whom it may concern, I specialized in the treatment of alcoholism for many years. In late 1934, I attended a patient, though he had been a competent businessman of good earning capacity, was an alcoholic of the type I come to regard as hopeless. As we know, that's referring to Bill Wilson. In the course of his third treatment, he acquired certain ideas concerning a possible means of recovery. I'll stop right here to remind everybody that in New York, he was going to treatment for the third time. State law said if you went to treatment more than 3 times, you're going to go to the nut house in Albany. So now Bill was out there for the third time at the town's hospital. As part of his rehabilitation, he commenced to present his conceptions to the other alcoholics, impressing upon them that they must do likewise with the still others. This has become the basis of rapidly growing fellowship, and these men and their families, this man and over 100 others appear to have recovered.
Wait a minute, Jim, you mean we can
Sure.
recover?
Wow, look at that word.
Oh, no.
Recovered. Wow. I personally know scores of cases of the type with whom the methods have failed completely. These facts appear to be of extreme medical importance because of the extraordinary possibility of the rapid growth inherent in the group. They mark a new epoch in the annals of alcoholism, and these men may well have a remedy for thousands of such situations. Now listen to this next sentence. You may rely absolutely on anything they may say about themselves. Very true to yours, William J. SILKWORTH, MD. Now, first edition. This was not signed. Alcoholism was still considered a moral issue. Had something to do with morals, values, sin, whatever. No, had not been any very little medical research about alcoholism. Dr. SILKWORTH was a prominent psychiatrist, had worked at Bellevue there in New York City, lost almost all of his clients because of depression, took a job for room and board and $40 a week at a nationally known hospital called the Town's Hospital. that treated alcoholics and drug addicts. So in the first edition of the book, he signed this. He didn't sign it because he thought he might be kicked out of the medical fraternity for writing basically heresy. Okay, so naturally in the second edition between 1939 and 1952, did some more medical research about it, so he signed his name. Mm-hmm. So you look here, and the next two paragraphs are vital. So,
yeah, the physician who, at our request, gave us this letter has been kind enough to enlarge upon his views in another statement which follows. In this statement, he confirms what we who have suffered alcoholic torture must believe, that the body of the alcoholic is quite as abnormal as his mind. It does not satisfy us to be told that we could not control our own drinking just because we are maladjusted to life, that we are in full flight from reality, or were outright mental defects. These things were true to some extent, in fact, to a considerable extent with some of us, but we are sure that our bodies were sickened as well. In our belief, any picture of the alcoholic that leaves out the physical factor is incomplete. The doctor's theory that we have an allergy to alcohol interests us. As laymen, our opinion as to soundness may, of course, mean little, but as ex-problem drinkers, we can say that this explanation makes good sense. It explains many things for which we cannot otherwise account. So, that allergy, when I put it in, I have a different reaction from the normal drinker, right? My body tells me to keep doing it, even though I know it's not going to turn out well. My brain keeps telling me it's going to be different, and it's that reaction that I get is what sets me off, it says here, but as ex-problem drinkers, right? Ex-problem drinker, recovered alcoholic, right? You may rely absolutely on anything they say about themselves. You could not rely on anything that I said before I recovered from a seemingly hopeless state of mind and body.
And also that second paragraph there, to me, was eye-opening. The doctor's theory that we have an allergy to alcohol interests us. As laymen, our opinions may have self mean little. But as ex-problem drinkers, we can say this explanation makes good sense. Now listen to this. It explains many things for which we cannot otherwise account. Mm-hmm. I saw that last sentence. I'm going, my gosh, there's finally an explanation to my behavior. Example, getting ready to get off work. Had a coworker who was having a birthday. They decided to have a birthday party at a restaurant that had a happy hour after work. I was living in Broken Arrow, Tulsa suburb at the time. Had a wife and a couple of stepkids. Nice house. Call my wife. Hey, coworker's having a birthday. We're going to celebrate his birthday at Pepper's, and for happy hour. No problem. Pick Brian up from soccer. Dinner will be ready at 7. I go to happy hour. Have a couple of drinks with my coworkers. I had a couple of drinks. My coworkers had a couple of drinks, and they left. I had a couple of drinks that created a craving inside me that they didn't have. I didn't get home till after midnight. My stepson had been abandoned at the soccer field. Coach had to bring him home. Dinner was trashed. She's screaming at me, "You sorry, rotten, no good SOB, why are you doing this to us?" I don't know. I don't know why. It explains many things which we cannot otherwise account. Allergy? I don't sneeze and wheeze when I drink. I don't break out in hives. But I was told, though, to look up that word in the dictionary. Mm-hmm. Abnormal reaction to a chemical compound or substance. It's now been proven medically, scientifically, physiologically, that when I take a drink, something happens inside this body that does not happen in most people that drink. Abnormal reaction, an allergy. My body says more. Period. You know, it doesn't happen in those others. So with that in mind, let's go to Roman numeral 28. Next page. It talks more about the allergy. We believe, and so suggested a few years ago, that the action of alcohol on these chronic alcoholics is a manifestation of an allergy, that the phenomenon of craving is limited to this class and never occurs in the average temperate drinker. These allergic types can never safely use alcohol in any form at all. And once having formed the habit and found they cannot break it, and once having lost their self-confidence, their reliance upon things human, their problems pile up on them and become astonishingly difficult to solve. Mm-hmm. My first wife, bless her heart, that woman was an average, normal drinker. Every time she drank, she got all she wanted. Her idea of going out and having a good time was going out and having a glass of wine with dinner. And 99% of the time, she'd leave half of it. She got all she wanted every time. And one time I asked her, I said, how do you feel when you've had a couple of drinks? Oh, I get a little queasy feeling in my stomach, get a little warm glow about me, might get a little horny. I'm just ready to go home. And I'm going, huh? I'm just the opposite. You give me a couple of drinks, and by gosh, I'm going to get more. They don't understand us. We don't understand them. God bless them. So anyway.
All right. The last paragraph on that same page, men and women who drink, essentially because they like the effect produced by alcohol. The sensation is so elusive that while they admit it's so injurious, they cannot after a time differentiate the truth from the false. To them, their alcoholic life seems the only normal one. They are restless, irritable, and discontented, unless they can again experience the sense of ease and comfort which comes at once by taking a few drinks which they see others taking with impunity. After they have succumbed to their desire again, as so many do, and the phenomenon of craving develops, they pass through the well-known stages of a spree, emerging remorseful with a firm resolution not to drink again. That is repeated over and over unless this person can experience an entire psychic change. There's very little hope for his recovery. For me, that is the Nestea plunge of Alcoholics Anonymous.
Exactly.
You know, because the old commercial, the guy, it's a hot day, he's just sweating, he's got cold deal iced tea, standing next to the pool, he drinks it, falls in the pool. That's exactly what happens to me when I put it in my body. Everything changes. You know, I'm good looking, I'm taller, I can dance, you know, all that stuff, right? That's what happens. You know, but that's the phenomenon of craving, you know, and that will continue and continue for me, right? Unless I have an entire psychic change, right? So it says here, with a firm resolution not to drink again. A resolution is only a good idea until you put action to it. You know, so, you know, we have a great idea that we're going to not do it again, but it's repeated over and over and over again until we have that psychic change.
And when I read this paragraph, I can tell my entire story right there. But one sentence, though, I want to go over again, to me is one of the most important sentences in the entire book, because it's a warning. This is repeated over and over, and unless I can experience an entire psychic change, there is very little hope of my recovery. And I don't know how it is here in Ponca City, but I know in Tulsa, a lot of people who are fortunate to make it back to the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous, because some people aren't fortunate. Some people do die out there, okay? But the ones who are fortunate to make it back, they go to the beginner meeting and they'll say, I slipped. The person across the room says, I relapsed. The person across the room says, I slipped more than you do. The person says, I'm a chronic relapser, like it's some kind of a badge of honor or something. Well, it's been my experience, and experience of Daniel's and anybody that's worked this program, that unless you've worked the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous with a sponsor out of a book called Alcoholics Anonymous, you have absolutely nothing to relapse or slip from, because you've never had the entire psychic change, period. I share this on here all the time. We do not have Plan B. I've been to funerals of people who have sat right in the rooms with me, who I've sat next to, who are still looking for Plan B. We don't have one. Period. This is repeated over and over. Unless I can experience an entire psychic change, there's no hope for me. Wow. Strong warning, but it's true.
Yep.
So.
So also that very next paragraph, it correlates with the on the page just before it, we believe. You know, it talks about their once having lost their self-confidence, their reliance upon human things, the problems pile up on them and they become astonishingly difficult to solve, right? And then on the top of page 20, what is that, 29? Mm-hmm. That little sentence that Jim just talked about, you know, he's recovered, right? He had the psychic change. Well, the next paragraph tells us what happens after so on the other hand, and strange as it may seem, those who do not understand, once the psychic change has occurred, the very same person who seemed doomed, who had so many problems, he despaired of ever solving them, suddenly finds himself easily able to control his desire for alcohol, the only effort necessary being that required to follow a few simple rules. You know, that's a flip right there from that original paragraph on the page before. Mm-hmm. And that's what happens when I have that psychic change, you know. It's a rearrangement from the inside out. Something that I can't do on my own. Or maybe I would have done it a long time ago, or maybe I wouldn't have, you know. All right, Bill.
But anyway, what it says here, the only effort necessary, mm-hmm. being that required. And so many times we hear, especially the newcomers, say, there's no must in AA. No, there's no must in the fellowship. But this book is full of must.
Yep.
Look up the word require. Must. Mm-hmm. Look up the word necessary. Must. The only effort necessary being that required to follow a few simple rules.
Yep.
Dr. Silkworth was not an alcoholic. He was a contributor to the book. He called them rules. And here we call them steps. Yep. Plain and simple. Okay?
There's also another way that must is spelled. It's in 2 words. Had to.
Had to. Exactly. Page Roman numeral 30, XXX. Talks here about the classifications of alcoholics. Now remember, Dr. Silkworth was a psychiatrist. Okay? And these next 2 paragraphs, or a few paragraphs, he kind of just qualifies 4 or 5 general personality types. Which talks about the classifications of alcoholics, seems most difficult, and as much detail is outside the scope of this book. And here are some. There's the psychopaths, who are emotionally unstable. We're all familiar with this type. They're always going on the wagon for keeps. They're over remorseful and make many resolutions, but never a decision. And we just talk about resolutions. Mm-hmm. There's the type of man who is unwilling to admit he cannot take a drink. He planned the various ways of drinking. He changes his brand or his environment. There's the type who always believes that he, after being entirely free from alcohol for a period of time, he can take a drink without danger. There's a manic depressive type who is perhaps least understood by his friends, about whom a whole chapter could be written. Then there's types entirely normal in every respect, except on the fact alcohol has upon us. Often able, intelligent, friendly people. Now listen to this next paragraph, please. All these and many others, we have one symptom in common. We cannot start drinking without developing the phenomenon of craving. This phenomenon, as we have suggested, may be the manifestation of an allergy. which differentiates these people and sets them apart as a distinct entity. It has never been, by any treatment of which we are familiar, permanently eradicated. The only relief we have to suggest is entire abstinence. Okay, you don't want the allergy? Then don't pick up the first drink. Wow, what a concept. If that's the case, then why is there detoxes? Why is there treatment centers? Why are we sitting here today in Alcoholics Anonymous? Because see, not only do we have a physical allergy to alcohol, we have a mind that says drink regardless of the consequences.
Beyond our mental control.
Remember, a twofold illness. A physical allergy coupled with a mental obsession to drink normally. And I use this as an example. If some of y'all know, my wife died of cancer a few years ago, 2 years ago. And let's suppose that we all get in a van or something and go to where my wife's been treated, was the Oklahoma Cancer Institute there in Broken Arrow. Walk upstairs, go upstairs, and there's about 80 chemo booths. And walk into one of those little booths and say, I have a solution to your problem. If you follow my directions and do what I ask you to do, I promise you somebody's going to get off that little recliner, get on their knees, and beg me for it. But unfortunately, take this to any AA meeting, detox, treatment center, and say the same thing. Oh, hell, I'm not that bad. I'm okay. I can do it my way. An illness that kills more people than cancer. Every 48 seconds worldwide, somebody dies from alcoholism. But it's the only illness known to man where the mind says, I don't have it. And I'm going to prove it to you that I don't have it. The obsession is what kills us. Okay? So remember this, that the only relief we have is just entire abstinence. Don't want the allergy, then don't drink. But what do we do after we stop drinking? We think. Oh my God. This is why we talked about the entire psychic change. I really love this what we just read here, especially that third paragraph. P1 types entirely normal in every respect, except when the effect alcohol has upon us. Able, intelligent, friendly people. I've been sober now for almost 40 years. I've been in meetings from Florida to Washington State. I can count on probably both hands people I've ever met who was literally ever under a bridge. Everybody I've ever met in AA are just normal people, normal jobs. I've sponsored political figures. I've sponsored commercial pilots. Normal people in every respect, except on the fact alcohol has on us. Able, intelligent, friendly people. But we're here today because that last paragraph. All of these and many others, we have one sentiment in common. Phenomenon. We can all start drinking without developing that phenomenon of craving. Yep. A craving that will literally kill you if you choose not. I mean, it's reality. Okay. So with that in mind, let's go to the last page here on this in Doctor's Opinion. It talks about some Dr. SILKWORTH getting to see what happens to us as we've had the psychic change.
About 1 year prior to this experience, a man who was brought in to be treated for chronic alcoholism had but partially recovered from a gastric hemorrhage, and seems that to be a case of pathological mental deterioration. He has lost everything worthwhile in life and was only living, one might say, to drink. He frankly admitted and believed that for him there was no hope. Following the elimination of alcohol, there was found to be no permanent brain injury. He accepted the plans outlined in this book, not the fellowship, in the book. 1 year later, he called to see me, and I experienced a very strange sensation. I knew the man by name and partially recognized his features, but there all resemblances ended. From a trembling, despairing, nervous wreck had emerged a man brimming over with self-reliance and contentment. I talked with him for some time now, but was not able to bring myself to feel that I had known him before. To me, he was a stranger, and so he left. A long time has passed with no return to alcohol. So, completely different person. You know, later on today, if you asked me to show you, I got a picture in my phone of what I looked like when I got here to y'all. In that picture, you will see a total 100% complete change. And that's what happens here. That's what happens. It completely changes us from the inside out.
That bottom paragraph there on Roman numeral 31, his alcoholic problem was so complex and his depression was so great that we felt his only hope was through what we called moral psychology. Then we doubted if even that would have any effect. So let's look at this last paragraph. However, he became sold on the idea contained in this book. He's not had a drink for a great many years. I see him now and then. He's a fine specimen of his manhood one could ever wish to meet. Now let's look at this last sentence, or this last paragraph. I earnestly advise every alcoholic to read this book through and through. Perhaps he came to scoff, and he may remain to pray. William D. SILKWORTH.
Scoff, the definition of scoff is to doubt.
To doubt. Maybe you're coming here today, and maybe you're doubting. But why would you want to come in here and try to change something that's worked for 80 years now for millions and millions and millions of people worldwide?
Well, you don't know who I am, Jim. I mean, I have an ego. I can do better.
You're kidding.
No, it's true. It's true.
Wow.
Just ask me. I'll tell you exactly who I am.
Exactly. So with that in mind, so now we know what the problem is. Anytime I read a medical book, as I retired from the medical community, anytime I was reading a medical book, there would be an explanation of the problem, and then after that, they might give a case history. So on page 1, chapter 1, is a perfect case history of alcoholism as we know it today. Bill's story.
Yeah.
And while we're reading Bill's story, when I was new, and I'd be in a meeting and we'd be reading Bill's story, I'll think, no, wait a minute. What does this have to do with me? Or alcoholism or anything? I'm in Tulsa. This guy's in New York. He's a stockbroker. I'm not. This is back in the 20s. I'm in the 80s. What does this have to do with me? Until I was told by a guy that said, why don't you start reading this and ask yourself in every paragraph, have I thought this way, felt this way, or done that? And allow that to become your story. Allow that to become, see if you can identify with it. So as we read Bill's story, we're going to ask yourselves, or ask you to ask yourselves, have I thought this way, felt this way, or done that? Okay? So as we read Bill's story, we'll know that he goes to World War I. He's over in England, and he sees this doggerel on a tombstone, and there's pictures of it here somewhere. I guess it's in my briefcase. But there's guys from my home group who have been over there. They found this tombstone at Winchester Cathedral. They brought it back. But anyway, it says, ominous warning which I failed to heed. Well, let's read this. It says, here's a lies Hampshire grenadier who caught his death drinking cold small beer. A good soldier is never forgot, whether he dieth by musket or by pot. And remember, we're not talking about pot. We're talking about a container. Okay. So now let's look here at the bottom paragraph. We're going to see immediately how Bill thinks. 22 and a veteran of foreign wars, I went home at last. I fancied myself as a leader, rather than not the men of my battery giving me a special token of appreciation. Now here it goes. Ask yourself, have they thought this way or felt this way? My talent for leadership, I imagined, would place me in the head of a vast enterprise which I would manage with utmost assurance. So immediately on the first page, we're seeing Bill's ego. Okay?
And you could also, if you'd like, take a highlighter and you can highlight every I in Bill's story. And you will see, I saw myself. Because, you know, I like to talk about me. And Bill also might have had that situation going on.
Exactly.
I took a night law course and obtained employment as an investigator for a surety company. To drive for success was on. I proved to the world I was important.
Does that sound familiar?
Whew. Can you do that? My arm's getting sore, Jim.
You better believe it.
My work took me about Wall Street, and little by little, I became interested in the market. Many people lost money, but some became very rich. Why not I? I studied economics and business as well as law. Potential alcoholic that I was, I nearly failed my law course. At one of the finals, I was too drunk to think or write. Though my drinking was not yet continuous, it disturbed my wife. We had long talks when I would steal her forebodings by telling her that men of genius conceive their best projects when drunk, that the most majestic constructions of philosophical thought were so derived. Boy, oh boy, if that was only true.
Okay, now see, we're already seeing how Bill is justifying his drinking. All right. Normal drinkers do not justify their drinking.
Nope.
Period. Okay. So then it says here that, excuse me, so by the time he completed the course, I knew the law was not for me. Excuse me. The inviting maelstroms of Wall Street had me in its grip. Business and financial leaders were my heroes. And out of this alloy of drink and speculation, I commenced to forge the weapon that one day would turn its flight like a boomerang and cut me all but cut me to ribbons. Living modestly, my wife and I saved $1,000. Now remember, this was back in the 20s. $1,000 would be equal to about $12,000 today. Okay, so Bill had some money. All right. So he was a stockbroker, but basically he was a stock speculator, a day trader. Okay,
So fast talking to slow thinking people.
Exactly. And he would buy low, sell high, plain and simple. And so here it says that they actually took off on a motorcycle, and they started investigating companies that were up and coming. They investigated Pittsburgh Plate Glass. They investigated General Electric. These companies that were just now becoming on the stock market. Today, they'd be like in buying Apple stock when it first started. Okay. So then it says here. Now let's look at the first paragraph on page 3 and ask yourself, have I thought this way? For the next few years, fortune threw money and applause my way. I had arrived.
Woo.
Wow! Here we go. My judgment and the idea were followed by many to the tune of paper millions. And I can relate to this so well, and I'm sure some of you in here in Ponca City can relate to this. Let's, instead of the stock market, talk about the oil boom. The great boom of the late 20s was seething and swelling. Drinking was an important and exhilarating part of my life. There was loud talk in the jazz places. Everyone spent in thousands and chattered in millions. Scoffers could scoff and be damned and made a host of fair-weather friends. Wow. I can so relate to that because back in the 70s and 80s, as y'all know very well, here in Ponca City and in Tulsa, it was if you couldn't make money in the oil business or in the oil something back then, something was wrong with you. Mm-hmm. And I've been to bars in Tulsa and did exactly that. talking millions, but if turned this upside down, you might get a quarter. We were just, I mean, I could relate very well to that. So anyway, but I had arrived. I can relate so well. My drinking has assumed more serious proportions, continuing all day and almost every night. The remonstrances of my friends terminated in a row, and I became a lone wolf. Now, please understand this next sentence. There's many unhappy scenes in our sumptuous apartment. Now, what does this next sentence mean? There had been no real infidelity, for loyalty to my wife helped at times with extreme drunkenness, kept me out of those scrapes. Now, did Bill pass out before it happened? Or what? We don't know. So, I mean, just the idea of knowing that, I mean, Bill was an alcoholic, period. I did read some, I think it's in AA Comes of Age or something, that he did wake up one time in the doorway of his apartment wearing a suit coat and a pair of shoes. So, you know, we don't know. Maybe when I get to heaven, that's one of the first questions I'll ask him. What does that mean? So we see here on page 3 and 4 how he was making a lot of money, then the crash of the stock market. Mm-hmm. Now look at that sentence. It says, I was staring at an inch of tape which had bore the inscription XYZ minus 32. It had been 52 that morning. I was finished, and so were many friends. The papers reported men jumping to the desks of towers of high finance. Now look at this. That disgusted me. I would not jump. I went back to the bar. My friends had dropped several million since 10 o'clock, so what? Now look at this. Have you ever thought this way? Tomorrow was another day. As I drank, the old fierce determination to win came back. By God, watch me. Mm-hmm. Here I go. Here, come on, world. See this right here? We're looking at Bill's ego. Okay. So as you see here, Bill was pretty smart. Canada was not in any kind of depression. He called a friend in Montreal. They moved up there. And so, page 4, bottom paragraph.
We went to live with my wife's parents. I found a job, then lost it as a result of a brawl with a taxi driver. Mercifully, no one could guess that I was to have no real employment for 5 years or hardly draw a sober breath. My wife began to work at a department store, coming home exhausted to find me drunk. I became an unwelcome hanger-oner at the brokerage places. And here we go. Liquor ceased to be a luxury. It became a necessity. Bathtub gin, 2 bottles a day, and often 3, got to be a routine. Sometimes a small deal would net a few $100s, and I would pay my bills at the bars and delicatessen. This went on endlessly, and I began to wake very early in the morning, shaking violently. A tumbler full of gin, followed by half a dozen bottles of beer, would be required if I were to eat any breakfast. Nevertheless, I thought I could control the situation, and there were periods of sobriety which renewed my wife's hope. So now Bill is past, he stepped across that line, right? He has to drink. He lost the choice in the drink, right? And I always like this here. It says, sometimes a small deal would net a few $100s, and I would pay my bills at the bars and delicatessens. Now his wife is working. She's paying all the bills at the house, and Bill's just making damn sure that he can drink and have a sandwich when she's at work.
There you go. Exactly.
There might be a little selfishness in there. Could be. So this is another defect of character that I found in my life.
And also it says here, now look at this. Gradually things got worse. Have you ever noticed anything for an alcoholic to get better? The house was taken over by the mortgage holder. My mother-in-law died. My wife and father-in-law became ill. Then I got a promising business opportunity. Stocks are at a low point. Like I said, Bill was a stock a speculator. He bought low and sold high. Stocks are at a low point in 32. I somehow formed a group to buy. I shared generously in the profits. Then I went on a prodigious bender, and that chance vanished. The definition for prodigious is great in extent, in size, or degree. So let's look at this next sentence, or this paragraph. I woke up. This had to be stopped. I saw I could not take as much as one drink. Now, how many times have you said this to your loved one, your spouse, or anybody? I was through forever. Whew. Before then, I made a lot of sweet promises, but my wife happily observed that this time I meant business, and so I did. Come on, world. I'm going to do it. Okay. Had the opportunity a year and a half ago to go to Stepping Stones up in New York. In the family Bible are Bill's promises to his wife, to Lois. And here, I'm going to pass this out to you. And you can have these. And these are actually in Bill and Lois's family Bible. All these sweet promises, all that like the Doctor of Opinion talks about, frothy emotional appeal. To my beloved wife that has endured so much, let this start as evidence of my pledge to you that I am finished with the desire forever. October 20th, 1928. Now, a month later, Thanksgiving Day, my strength is renewed by 1,000-fold in my love for you. Less than 2 months later, January 12th, I tell you once more that I am finished with it. I love you. A year later, finally and for the last time, or finally and for a lifetime, thank God for your love. Frothy emotional appeal. As we're going to read here, it seldom suffices. So as we see here on page 6, that Bill, remember on page 4, he was laughing at people who were killing themselves. Mm-hmm. But we're going to look at Bill's emotional down spiral. Okay. Says the remorse, horror, and hopelessness of the next morning are unforgettable. The courage to do battle was not there. My brain raced uncontrollably. There was a terrible sense of impending calamity. I hardly dared to cross the street lest I collapse and be run down by an early morning truck, for it was scarcely daylight. An all-night place supplied me with a dozen glasses of ale. My withering nerves were stilled at last. A morning paper told me that the market had gone to hell again. Well, so had I. The market would recover, but I wouldn't. This is a hard thought. Now look at this. Bill's now thinking about suicide. Should I kill myself? Nah. Not now. There's a mental fog settled down. Jim to fix that. 2 bottles. And now Bill is drinking only for oblivion. So we're seeing now his psychological and spiritual and emotional decline. Okay. But look at this though. He survived this for another 2 years. You talk about the grace of God. Bill survived this. Okay. So then, on page 7, we know that his brother-in-law was a physician, and through his kindness and that of my mother, I was placed in a nationally known hospital for the mental and physical rehabilitation of alcoholics. Under the so-called belladonna treatment, my brain cleared. Hydrotherapy and mild exercise helped much. Best of all, I met a kind doctor who explained that I had been certainly selfish and foolish. I've been seriously ill, body and mentally. This is his first reference to Dr. SILKWORTH.
It relieved me somewhat to learn that an alcoholic that in alcoholics, the will is amazingly weakened when it comes to combating liquor, though it often remains strong in other respects. My incredible behavior in the face of desperate desire to stop was explained. Understanding myself now, I fared forth in high hope. For 3 or 4 months, the goose hung high. Everything was good, you know. I went to town regularly and even made a little money. Surely this was the answer. Self-knowledge.
You better believe it.
Whew, that works every time.
I've been in treatment. I've learned about THIQs, and I've learned about the doctor's opinion. I know what's wrong with me now. By gosh, I can do it.
But it was not for the frightful day came when I drank once more. The curve of my declining moral and bodily health fell off like a ski jump. After a time, I returned to the hospital. This was the finish, the curtains, it seemed to me. My weary and despairing wife was informed that it would all end up with heart failure or during delirium tremens, or I would develop wet brain perhaps within a year. She would soon have to give me over to the undertaker or the asylum.
Now remember, like I said, this is his third. He's gone to treatment now. State law in New York, if you don't sober up by the third time, you're going to Albany. You're going to the nut house.
Yep. They did not need to tell me. I knew and almost welcomed the idea. It was a devastating blow to my pride. I, who had thought so well of myself and my abilities, of my capacity to surmount obstacles, was cornered at last. Now I was to plunge into the dark, joining the endless processions of sots who had gone before me. I thought of my poor wife. There had been much happiness after all. What would I not give to make amends? But that was over now.
And notice here the next paragraph is where Bill, our co-founder of Alcoholics Anonymous, does the first part of step 1. No fear can tell the loneliness and despair I found in the bitter morass of self-pity. Quicksand stretched around me in all directions. Look at this. I'd met my match. I'd been overwhelmed. Alcohol was my master. He did the first part of step 1. He admitted he was powerless over alcohol. Okay, so now he gets sober the first time on self-knowledge. Now he gets sober on fear. Let's look at here. Trembling, I stepped from the hospital a broken man. Fear sobered me up a bit. Then came the insidious insanity of the first drink. Because remember, Bill didn't have any kind of program. He was doing it on his own. On our armistice day of 35 or 34, I was off again. Everybody became resigned to the certainty that I would have to shut up somewhere or stumble along to a miserable end. How dark it is before the dawn. In reality, that was the beginning of my last debauch. I was soon be catapulted into what I like to call the fourth dimension of existence. Now, Bill Wilson, in the first 164 pages, mentions this term, fourth dimension, 3 times. So what is the fourth dimension? You know, an insect or a sea creature that we know nothing about, they're here on God's earth for a reason. We don't know why, but God does. So they're in the first dimension. A domesticated animal, dog or cat, they can show love and emotion, but they still live on instinct. They're in the second dimension. Us humans, we're in the third dimension because we can have something called self-will. But personally, to me, the fourth dimension is something called grace.
Walking hand in hand with the spirit of the universe.
Exactly. Yeah. Also, the word time. Remember, everybody else does not. We were given time. We choose our time. But everything else, though, every living creature, though, doesn't. So it's time. To me, it's time and grace. Okay. So he'd been rocketed into the fourth dimension, he thinks. So anyway, he's sitting there back in his apartment again. They're on Clinton Street in New York City, bottoming out. The last paragraph on page 8. My musing was interrupted by a telephone. A cheery voice of an old school friend asked if he might come over. Oh my gosh, look at this. He was sober. It had been years since I'd remember him coming to New York in that condition. I was amazed. Rumor had it that he had been committed for alcoholic insanity. I wondered how he had escaped. Of course, we would have dinner, and then I could drink openly with him. Now look at this. This right here kind of gives you an idea of Bill's ego. Unmindful of his welfare, I thought only of recapturing the spirit of those other days. There's a time we had chartered an airplane to complete a jag. Its coming was an oasis of the dreary fertility of the dreary desert of futility. The very thing, an oasis. The door opened and he stood there, fresh-skinned and glowing. There's something about his eyes, he looked inexplicably different. Now remember, let's look at this. Now we're going to look at Bill's ego, okay? Here Bill Wilson is bottoming out, totally, physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually. His friend comes to visit him. He's been sober 3 months. So Bill offers the guy a drink. He refused it. Disappointed but curious, I wondered what had got into the fellow. He wasn't himself. Come what this is all about, I queried. He looked straight at me and simply said, I've got religion. Oh my gosh. Here it goes. I was aghast. So that was it. Last summer, an alcoholic crackpot. Now suspected of a little crack about religion. Now I want you to look at this next sentence, okay? Now this right here is the epitome of Bill's ego. Bill is bottoming out, period, totally, everything. His friend comes to visit him sober, and he's sober. But look at Bill's reaction. Yeah, he had that starry-eyed look all right. Yes, the old boy's on fire all right, but God bless him. Bless his heart. Isn't that pitiful? I mean, that to me just is the epitome of Bill's ego. The guy's sober. But what does Bill say? Bless his heart. Let him rant. But my gym would last longer than his preaching. But he did no ranting. In a matter-of-fact way, he told how 2 men had appeared in court, persuading the judge to suspend his commitment. They told him of a simple religious idea and a practical program of action. That was 2 months ago, and the result was self-evident. It worked. Now, this, as we know, this is referring to Ebby Thatcher going to, he was getting ready to be committed to Albany. And 2 guys from what was called the Oxford movement, the Oxford groups of the day. This was a religious movement today compared, I could see, probably compare it to the Salvation Army. They didn't have churches, but they would meet in people's houses, or they had storefronts, but they'd meet in people's houses and storefronts, and they had what was called 6 tenets. And they followed these 6 tenets. As we know today, they became 12 steps. Okay. But the fact is, though, that Ebby came to share this with Bill. So we're going to look here on page 10 and 11, and we're not going to read all of this, but Bill will admit that he was hardcore agnostic, borderline on atheist. Remember, Bill was raised an orphan. Bill had been to World War I. He had seen death. He came back, he had made $1 million, he had lost $1 million. He was a hard-hearted man. The idea of a God out there, he could handle a God in the universe. But a God personal to him, it said it made him throw up. So as we see here on page 10 and 11, he just talks about how relationship or no relationship with God. But then, though, you see here on the 3rd paragraph on page 11, but my friend sat before me, and he made the point blank declaration that God has done for him what he cannot do for himself. His human will had failed. Doctors had pronounced him incurable. Society was about to lock him up. Like myself, he admitted a complete defeat. Now remember, Bill Wilson had done the first part of step 1 when he admitted that alcohol was his master. Then he had an effect which raised from the dead, suddenly taken from the scrap heap of the level of life better than the best he had ever known. Had this power originated in him? Obviously it had not. There had been no more power in him than there was in me at that minute. That was all this, and this was none at all. That floored me. It began to look as though the religious people might be right after all. Here was something at work in a human heart which had done the miraculous. My ideas about miracles were drastically revised right then. Never mind the musty past. So Bill is now no longer looking at his past. He's looking right at the present. And that to me is also, when I say the word time, being one of the fourth dimensions. He was looking at the present, not the past. Okay? He shouted great tidings. Now let's look at it here on page 12. That, to me, one of the most important sentences of the entire book is mentioned here in the second paragraph. Go ahead.
My friend suggested then seemed a novel idea. He said, "Why don't you choose your own conception of God?" Well, isn't that interesting? That statement hit me hard. It melted the icy intellectual mountain in whose shadow I had lived and shivered many years. I stood in the sunlight at last. It was only a matter of being willing to believe in a power greater than myself. Nothing more was required of me to make a beginning. I saw that growth could start from that point. Upon a foundation of complete willingness, I might build what I saw in my friend. Would I have it? Of course I would.
That's where our founder of Alcoholics Anonymous just did step 2. He became willing. Now imagine, remember, the Oxford movement, they were an evangelical movement of the day. And the point is that finally Ebby said, "Bill, why don't you just choose your own conception? We don't care." This, to me, right here, this sentence went from the evangelical movement of the Oxford group to spirituality as we know it today in Alcoholics Anonymous.
Yeah.
You choose your conception.
Yeah.
In Alcoholics Anonymous, we're not here to save a soul.
No.
We're here to save a life.
Yeah.
Period. We do not care what you believe, how you believe, but just believe in something greater than you.
Yeah.
He became willing. And this is where our founder of Alcoholics Anonymous just did step 2. Then we're going to read the bottom paragraph there.
The real significance of my experience in the cathedral burst upon me. For a brief moment, I had needed and wanted God. There had been a humble willingness to have him with me, and he came. But soon, the sense of his presence was blotted out by worldly clamors, mostly within myself. And so it had been ever since. How blind had I been?
So it says here that the hospital I was separated from alcohol for the last time. Treatment seemed wise, for I showed signs of DTs. Okay, now let's look at these next few paragraphs and see what happened to Bill. Okay. There I humbly offered myself to God as I then understood him, to do with me as he would. I placed myself unreservedly under his care and direction. I admitted for the first time of myself I was nothing, that without him I was lost. I ruthlessly faced my sins and became willing to have my newfound friend take them away, root and branch. I've not had a drink since. This is where our co-founder of Alcoholics Anonymous, Bill Wilson, just did step 3. Okay? Now let's look at this. My schoolmate visited me, and I fully acquainted himself with my problems and deficiencies. Does that sound like step 4 and 5?
Mm-hmm.
We made a list of people whom I'd hurt and to whom I felt resentment. There we go. We're still in that 4 and 5. I expressed my willingness to approach these individuals, admitting my wrong. Step 8 and 9. Never was I to be critical of them. I was to write out such matters to the utmost of my ability. Bill did steps 4 through 9 right there. Wow. I was to test my thinking with a new God consciousness from within. Does that sound like step 10?
Mm-hmm.
Common sense will become uncommon sense. I was to sit quietly when in doubt, asking only for direction and strength to meet my problems as He would have me. Never was I to pray for myself except for the request bore to my usefulness to others. Then only might I expect to receive, but that would be in great measure, and that's step 11.
Yep.
Well, now look at this. My friend promised me, and this is the first word we're going to see the word promise in the book, that when these things were done, I'd enter a relationship with my Creator, a new relationship with my Creator, that I would have an element of a way of living which answered all my problems.
Yep.
Belief in the power of God plus enough willingness, honesty, and humility to establish and maintain the new order of things were the essential requirements. Simple but not easy. A price had to be paid. It meant destruction of all self-centeredness. I must turn in all things to the Father of light, which provides over us all. Step 12.
Yep.
He gets to practice these principles in all of his affairs. Now look at this next paragraph. There was a revolutionary and drastic proposals. The moment I fully accepted them, the effect was electric. And I want to share this with you people. Please understand this. That's the only time, twice, in reference to the word acceptance, is mentioned in the first 164 pages. As y'all know, there's a story in the back of the book where it's become almost like a mantra of Alcoholics Anonymous. I was 2 years sober, and I went to the state conference in Oklahoma City, and the guy who wrote that paragraph or that chapter about acceptance, Dr. Paul, was a speaker on Saturday night. That Saturday morning, I was down in the restaurant and having breakfast. I looked across the aisle, almost barely past arm's length. There was Dr. Paul and his wife. They were eating breakfast. I said, "Can I join you?" "Sure." I said, "I want to ask you a question." "Oh, I know already that thing about acceptance, right?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "Don't forget, there's 10 pages of that story before that paragraph. That's after I've been in Alcoholics Anonymous 8 years, and after I worked the steps of Alcoholics Anonymous with a sponsor out of a book called Alcoholics Anonymous." He said, "I have no idea why in these, quote, damn jitter joints, the first thing a person sees in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous is a paragraph about acceptance." He said, "Acceptance is not an event, it's a process."
Mm-hmm.
That's after I'd worked AA's 12 steps. And that's the only time you're going to see that word. Oh, that word's mentioned twice in the text portion of the book. And he said, "I have no idea why these people have taken this to heart. That acceptance is not the answer to all my problems. It's acceptance only after I've worked the steps." So with that in mind, remember that, Bill Wilson has worked the 12 steps. I hope you understand this. I'll share it again. Bill Wilson had a sponsor named Evie Thatcher. He in turn took this to Akron, Ohio, and met a guy named Dr. Bob. Dr. Bob had a sponsor and did exactly what Bill did. They in turn took it to an attorney named Bill Dodson. Mm-hmm. Bill Dodson had a sponsor and did exactly what they did. And every person who's got sober in Alcoholics Anonymous since the beginning of time, 80 years ago, has done exactly the same thing. I would encourage you to remember this, and I'll share this again. We have no plan B in here. Period. Yep. Every person who comes in here and successfully does the transformation is only as a result of the steps out of this book.